You're watching Mac and Jack on National Streaming Sports.
Sports Memories with Mac, Jack, and Doc on Northeast Streaming Sports. Every Saturday at 8 a.m. Yes, sir. Every Saturday at 8 a.m. And here we are to start off your Roku day again, as we always do, Mac and Jack. Jack, today we're going to touch on a few different subjects. Because the Olympics are done, I thought it'd be good that maybe we take a look back at the 1976 Olympics. We'll talk about the NBA and the great Big O, Oscar Robertson himself. And I'm going to take a look at semi-pro football, which, we looked at before. We were, we had coaches on. We've even broadcast some semi-pro games, believe it or not, on the network. But I'm going to take a little different approach, and it's going to be a little fun. So we're going to talk about that near the end. But first, Jack, let's talk about maybe the best boxing class in Olympic history, the 1976 Olympic team.
Well, I thought we were going to talk about all of the 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal. I mean, the United States boxing team stood out amongst everything, but there were a lot of storylines going on. And there was Bruce Jenner winning the decathlon. I want to comment on that. I mean, we know Bruce Jenner's status today. It's no longer Bruce Jenner, but I don't want to get into all of that. But Bruce Jenner was considered basically the all-American boy. He was on the Wheaties box after winning the decathlon. As an athletic event, Bruce Jenner was slightly behind after the first of the 2 days of competition, but he knew he was going to win because the second day by far were his stronger events that he'd have to compete in. So to only be slightly behind was in reality like being ahead after the first day. And Bruce Jenner did win the decathlon. He could have led up on the 1,500-meter run at the end, but he ran hard. He wanted to finish like an Olympic champion should, and he did. And track and field was very intriguing. Edwin Moses won the 400-meter hurdles, the first of his two. Then they had a boycott in 1980. Then he won the 400-meter hurdles again in 1984. So if it wasn't for the boycott, he would have, without a doubt, repeated, as far as that went. And then you had the great Lassie Varin. He repeated what he did in 1972, winning the 5,000 and 10,000 meter races. Okay, so he pulled off the double two Olympics in a row. And then you had Frank Shorter, who won the 1972 Olympic marathon, an American, and he was the favorite to repeat, but he kind of got tripped up by Lassie Varin and wound up winning the silver medal. Not Lassie Varin, Vladimir Sapinski. Vladimir Sapinski. And Sapinski then repeated in 1980. But then there was the controversy with the blood doping. Was Sapinski involved? Suspicions were also hanging over Lassie Varin to an extent. So yeah. But it was an intriguing Olympics in Montreal. But it was, and then at Nadia Comaneci, the gymnast all around. Yeah. And as a carryover, she became such a popular Olympian that when she recently talked out on this bronze medal controversy, the International Olympic Committee seemed to side with her, with the bronze medal thing that just happened. And then they got the United States boxing team, okay? In America, it was great. They were the big story of the Olympics. Howard Cosell broadcast the event, and it was a great build-up to the event, and there was a lot of drama. I mean, of course, there was the great Sugar Ray Leonard, who had that wonderful smile, and people were saying, could he win the gold? And Leonard did win the gold, and that set him off into a great professional career, great TV deal. And then you had Howard Davis, compelling story. His mother died, while he was there, in the Olympic Village there. He wasn't sure whether to continue fighting, going on with the Olympics, or to go home. And he then decided he was going to stay because that's what his mother wanted him to. And he won the gold medal and was given the Val Baker Trophy as the most outstanding boxer of the games. Then there were the Spinks brothers, Michael and Leon. Leon won his fight sensationally, knocking out, favorite Cuban Andres Almeida. And in all, the United States won 5 golds. Leo Randolph was the 5th gold medal winner. They won a silver, Charles Mooney, and they won a bronze with John Tate, who got knocked out by Teofimo Stevenson, a much more experienced guy. And, I was fortunate, Mac, that last winter, last March or something like that in Florida, I got to spend an afternoon with Charles Mooney, who was the silver medalist on that team, on that boxing team. And we talked about the team. He reminisced, and it kind of made me feel even more of a bond with them. But they were really America's darlings. We didn't have cable TV, to watch so the boxing team was the focus. They were like must-view watching. You have to understand the time in 1976. The boxing events were much more popular than the basketball events, much more. The 2 most watched events would really be boxing and track and field. Gymnastics was popular too, but it's not like today where the boxing would be put on the secondary Olympic channel. It's not really highlighted. We don't know the fighters going in. In reality, there's very little interest today, in Olympic boxing in the United States, at least.
Jack, I just the total opposite. It's like an opposite world where we got all these gold and we did well in other Olympics too. The 76 maybe the best, maybe the second best, you can argue, but we got 1 bronze medal this boxing time around in this Olympics. How far can you fall from getting, 8 medals and 6 gold and down to 1 bronze? It's like nobody's even interested in the United States in boxing anymore. It's incredible. I mean, I remember the Olympic trials. Listening and watching to some of the Olympic trials to see who actually was going to be on the team. And there was a lot of great boxers that didn't even make the teams. This is how competitive it was.
You're right, Mac. A great point by you. It used to be a big deal to watch the Olympic trials, the box-offs, to see who was going to get on the team. We wanted to see would Mike Tyson make the team, and we'd watch on ABC TV him get outpointed, him not being able to make the Olympic team. We'd see Evander Holyfield sneak up on a favored Ricky Womack to make the team. Right. We'd see upsets that be storylines, who was going to make the team. It was so competitive. We'd see Aaron the Hawk Pryor lose to Howard Davis in the Olympic trials. 2 fairly evenly matched guys. Davis just a little better as an amateur. And there'd be these great matchups, great storylines, but there was no build-up to it this year with the United States.
Nothing.
No build-up at all. I couldn't tell you who was on the team. The Olympics over, Mac. I couldn't tell you anything about the Olympics. If you told me to give a recap of what the United States did in the 1976, in the 2024 Olympic Games, I'm at a standstill. I wasn't paying attention, Mac.
And
I just wasn't paying attention like you. And that's me. If I knew boxing was on at that moment, I would watch it. If I knew it was going to be on in a half hour, I'd make it a point to watch it. Okay? But I didn't go out of my way to find out. I went out of my way to look up when all the track and field events were going on. I wanted to see those. I wanted to find out when Katie Ledecky was swimming. I wanted to see when the great French swimmer Marquand was swimming. I was interested when Simone Biles was going to go on gymnastics. I kind of targeted those athletes. Boxing, I just didn't target. But in large part, Mac, because amateur boxing is a farce as far as the judging goes. You get these crazy, outrageous decisions. And like I've said many times, after the 1988 Olympics, after that decision that went against Roy Jones, it was so crazy and off the charts that it wouldn't get reversed, that judges got scored against them. Okay. I didn't want to watch it again. And they further made fools of themselves, the Olympic Committee in 1988. They award Roy Jones the outstanding boxer of the 1988 Olympics, but he didn't win a gold medal.
No, I know.
He didn't win a gold medal. If he's a silver medalist, how are you making him the outstanding boxer? That's telling me your judges were either dishonest or incompetent. If you're going to make that ruling, reverse the darn decision. Decisions can get reversed if there's some type of evidence there, or if you don't want to take the gold medal away from someone, you just add in another one. You have a special circumstance type thing.
They could do that. They could do that, Jack, if they really wanted to. I mean, they could have done something like that. This is James. James says, kids don't fight anymore. You don't have to now. Physical fighting saw synonymous with achieving greatness, not anymore. When we talk to John Scully and about some of the fighters that are over in the other countries, back in the 70s and 60s and 50s and 40s, there were a lot of poor people in America. And I mean, by poor, I mean not eating poor. And the streets were not a place to really grow up. And they turned to fighting to get out of the streets. It seems, Jack, from what John Scully was saying, is it's that way now in Europe, in the Europe thing, Ukraine and in parts of Russia and Germany, where it's just violent all the time. And the way to get out of there is to fight. And they're doing the same thing in Europe, basically, as we did here. Because it's bothered me that we really don't have any. We have a couple, but we really don't have great American fighters like we used to.
Scully's got a brilliant mind, but I'll disagree with him on what he's saying. And I can't say I'm confident he's wrong, but I'm going to disagree with what he's saying. Mac, any kid or any person who takes up a sport, they never take it up in the beginning with the thought, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm doing this for economics. I'm going to be a champion. Never, Mac. You take it up because it's something you fall into. You like it. You take an interest. And then once you've done it a while, on a lower level, like a kid playing baseball, a kid boxing, a kid playing basketball. And when you start moving up the chain and you're really outstanding, at some point the thought comes, wow, I can make the major leagues. I can be a world champion. I could do this. Then the thought that you could maybe make a lot of money later on comes into play. But even then, you don't think of the money primarily or way out for a future until you've gone to a certain point where you're really good. You're basically playing these sports for love of the game. That's what you're really doing, at least initially, the first few years. And then when you see you're good at it, you see the advancement that you could make within the sport. And then maybe you start looking how far you can go. Don't tell me a kid who's 14 who puts on the gloves and goes to a gym is thinking, this is a way out for my family. Maybe in 3 years he wins an amateur title. Now he's thinking, maybe down the line at a certain point.
Well, and one more before we move on to these guys in 1976. I remember Jerry Cooney saying he wanted to get the hell out of the house when we interviewed him. It was a bad situation, and he went down to the gym. I guess his brother was fighting at the time, was in the gym, and he ended up fighting at 15 years old, lost, and went back and fought the guy again. So I think there is something to the environment, Jack. There is something that will make somebody, and maybe not get, like you're saying, make money, but to get out of a situation, to get away from a situation. So maybe I'm saying it wrong.
No. Well, that's why certain young men go into the service.
Right.
They just want to, they want to serve their country. Don't get me wrong. They want to serve their country. They want to do an honorable thing. They're thinking they're not, but when they first go into the service, if they're coming from a bad environment, a lot of them aren't thinking, I'm going to go into the service because I can have a good career. I can get benefits. I can get kids. They don't think of that. They think of maybe escaping their environment at the moment. They just go somewhere else because they're sick of the moment that they're living in, and they want something different.
It's a great point. So let's look at these guys as we follow them. And back, believe it or not, folks, we used to follow their careers. The build up to the Olympics, as we talked about, the trials, the stories. They go to Olympics, they win or lose. You know, maybe they don't take gold, but they win a medal. We continue to follow them. This is like, now we get to know the fighters. Now we have a personal interest in the fighters, which there really isn't today. So bronze medals, John Tate, Jack. He goes on, he has a good pro career. I mean, he's like 34-3. He has a title. I mean, I know he lost his title.
WBA heavyweight title he won as a pro.
Right. So, I mean, he had a good career. It's not like, it's not like that he came back and he couldn't fight pro. He could fight pro pretty well. He was a pretty good boxer.
And he did. He held the WBA heavyweight title, and where his career basically ended, it was the beginning of a complete downfall. He was beating Mike Weaver with a 15-round fight, defending his WBA heavyweight title, far ahead on points. And he got caught with a minute to go and got knocked out cold. He was never the same after that.
See, I don't remember what happened to him after. I saw the fight, and I saw Mike Weaver, and I saw, he's like an Atlas. He looked like a weightlifter. And Big John Tate was he was a boxer. Yeah. He's moving around, and he's a big boy. And when he hit him, he felt like
makes you think. You mentioned something interesting, Mac. Mike Weaver, his nickname was Hercules, because all the muscles. Ken Norton looked similar to Mike Weaver. All these muscles. Now, steroids weren't around at that time. They weren't around, not in 1979 when Weaver got knocked out. I think it was 1979 he knocked out Tate or whatever. But the thing about it is, had steroids been around and we looked at the physique on Weaver Norton, we would have thought, oh, those guys must be on steroids, but they weren't. 100%. We would have thought that about Rocky Marciano too, who's very solid. So that's an interesting point.
100% right. Light heavyweight Leon Spinks goes on. He's like 26-17-3.
Well, but it's unfair. A lot of those losses, most of them late in his career.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. I just wanted to include that he did beat Muhammad Ali for the championship at least the first time. Ali came back, but I mean, he was a good heavyweight. That fight against Ken Norton was epic, Jack. When he knocked down
Leon. No, you're probably thinking of Larry Holmes Ken Norton fight. That was an epic fight.
Sorry. George Foreman versus Leon Spinks.
George Foreman never fought Leon Spinks, Mac. Yeah.
Okay, I know you're sure. I actually.
Mac, don't look at Mac. Don't waste your time looking it up. I know more than what you can look up.
I know. Go ahead.
No offense to the people writing it down, but they never fought.
I'm trying to remember who that fight was with Foreman. That they
Foreman. You're not thinking Michael Mora. Dwight Muhammad Kawi, who was a little tank who fought Foreman when Foreman was going to come back.
Maybe.
But Leon Spinks, before beating Muhammad Ali, he fought a draw with a fighter, Scott Ledoux. I thought Spinks won the fight personally, watching it, but it was called a draw. And then he's fighting Ali there, only had 7 fights as a pro. And Spinks had the perfect style for Ali. He was raw. Ali was towards the end of his career. Ali, I'm going to tell you something. Ali was an underachiever, okay? Ali didn't achieve as much as he could in his career. Now, that sounds crazy. That sounds crazy for me to say it, because he didn't train as hard as he should have during the second coming, during the forced layoff. After that, he trained hard for a few fights, but all in all, he took shortcuts. He'd get in just good enough condition. He never got in supreme condition. So when a Floyd Mayweather puts an Ali down, people get outraged, but at least Floyd respected the sport in the sense that he always trained very hard, always entered the ring in top condition. That wasn't the case with Ali. And that's why he lost to Spinks, because Spinks had a tremendous energy level, would come forward with punch, 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 punch. And Ali's physical condition was lacking just enough where he would be losing rounds that he should have been winning. So he loses a split decision in the first fight against Spinks, a decision that could have gone either way. I had it scored a draw for what it's worth, but no arguments with the decision. And Spinks, after winning the first Ali fight, was never the same. For the second fight, there were too many men in his ear, giving him instructions, and the corner was crazy. And then it was all downhill. And then Spinks, late in his career, had a couple other shots at the title. He challenged Larry Holmes for the heavyweight title, got stopped in 3 rounds, and then he challenged Dwight Muhammad Qawi for a cruiserweight title and got stopped.
So his brother, Michael Spinks, goes on, has an unbelievable light heavyweight career. Some people say he might be the greatest light heavyweight of all time. He's 31-1. Of course, everybody remembers him going up to fight Mike Tyson and losing that like in the first round. But as a light heavyweight, Jack, he dominated during his time. He's in the Hall of Fame right now.
Yeah, he did. He had one close fight against the fighter Eddie Davis. He won the scorecards were wide in Spinks' favor, but it was a very tight, close fight. I think Spinks did deserve the decision, but just barely, even though the judges had it wide for him. And yeah, he was a great light heavyweight. Yeah. He was a great light heavyweight. And then, he transitioned as a heavyweight and beat Larry Holmes to win the title. Holmes is probably a little past his best, in all fairness, at that point in his career. And then in the rematch, I think Holmes should have been given the decision and should have been, have regained the title. But the judges, scored it for Spinks. And then he stopped Jerry Cooney. But then he ran into Mike Tyson and got knocked out in 91 seconds. A lot of people said, well, Spinks was so scared of Tyson and this and that. I think he was intimidated to an extent because he got knocked down by a body punch, and was the first time in his career he went down. But then when he got up, he tried to exchange with Tyson, and Spinks threw a mean right hand. But Tyson was quicker. He beat him to the punch and knocked Spinks out.
Yeah. I remember it being on, I think that was PPV, if I'm not mistaken, because the bar had it where I was at down in the Air Force. And I went in, I saw the fight starting. I was playing pool in the back. I said, I'll be right, I'm coming right back to watch the thing. And, the game is over at pool. And it was like a minute. And I went back and the fight was over. It's like, holy God, what the hell happened?
That was the most sensational performance of Tyson's career.
Yeah.
The fight with Spinks. I mean, if you take all these great fighters in boxing history and give them all a legacy fight, what was the best fight of their career, and put it out there, that would be Tyson's. Even though it only went, a half a round, he was sensational, quick, on top of his game.
So we get to probably the most favorite, the darling of the 1976 Olympics, which was Sugar Ray Leonard. He goes on to have an unbelievable career too. I mean, he won multiple titles. He fought great fighters in doing it too. That's what I loved about these fighters too. They didn't cherry pick anything. I want the title. You want to fight? Let's fight. I love that about him. But again, Jack, here's the story that we knew. We already knew Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, as a welterweight, you got what? Sugar Ray Robinson and Sugar Ray Leonard. How close is it? And is Sugar Ray Leonard, is he arguably, could you say arguably up there in his class?
Yeah. He's definitely in Robinson's class. Definitely. And if you want to make an argument he was better than Robinson, you can. I don't care what my buddy Frank Laterzo says on Glove Fist. You can make the argument. We don't have tape on Robinson fighting as a welterweight. We just look at his record. He was incredible. Robinson was an athlete that was something like 40 years ahead of his time. Once in a while, you get an athlete who's so great during his era, he's the reason he's so great is because he's ahead of his time, like Babe Ruth in baseball.
Right.
I mean, he did more than whole teams did because he was ahead of his time. I'm not saying he would be as good, but if you put Pete Alonso, the Met first baseman, a slugger, in the 1920s, drop him off in the 1920s, he would be better than he was today. Okay, we can agree on that. It would just be a question of how much better.
Right.
And the mindset was different. They fought more back in the day. So you could argue the accomplishments were greater back in the day because they fought more. I'm good with that.
Right.
But Sugar Ray Leonard was outstanding. Frank also, I'm going to call him out on this on Glove Fist when we have a show Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. He's saying in boxing history, there were two fighters who would not be denied victory no matter what. That was Joe Frazier in the first Ali fight. I agree with Frank 100% there, no debating that. And he says, and the other was Roberto Duran against Leonard in the first fight in Montreal. Well, I got news for you, Frank. Leonard was the more effective fighter in the later rounds of that fight. So don't tell me Duran won't be denied. Leonard's willpower was just as great as Duran's was that night. Leonard tried not to be denied, but Leonard lost the first 4 rounds and got wobbled badly in the second round of that fight. So in reality, Leonard was something like 5 points behind after 4 rounds, yet he closed the gap by being, coming on strongly in the later rounds. Duran stood with him in the later rounds, So the two of them really went at it, but Leonard's willpower was just as great as Duran's in that fight.
Listen, I don't dispute what you're saying at all. I've watched Sugar Ray Leonard against Thomas Hearns. Talk about willpower. I mean, that guy took a pounding and still came back. He went toe-to-toe with Marvin Hagler. He jumped out fast, but he still had to withstand Hagler coming back. So, I mean, that guy, listen, Sugar Ray Leonard had a lot of willpower. I don't care.
Frank's making it out like, Duran didn't have more willpower than Leonard that night. Duran had a tremendous will to win, tremendous. But don't make it seem like he wouldn't be denied no matter what. In comparison to Leonard,
so,
I mean.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, no, I made my point.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So, lightweight Howard Davis, 36-6-1, but he never won a championship, Jack, from what I read. I mean, that's still a hell of a record.
I'm going to tell you, Howard Davis, it kind of breaks my heart. He passed away years ago. You're from Glen Cove, Long Island. When he turned pro, he was on the same level as Leonard. And in fact, Leonard got signed by ABC Television to a nice deal to fight, for them. And Davis got signed by CBS. It was Gil Clancy who did broadcasting for CBS and was an advisor to CBS, who told them he thinks Davis is a better bet to sign than Leonard because Leonard has bad hands. Davis could be a better pro. Part of it's how guys are marketed. Each of them, when they had their first professional fight, it was met with tremendous fanfare. Leonard's was in his hometown of Landover, Maryland. They had a big arena. You could see the excitement on TV with Sugar Ray. They were cheering, noisy. Davis fought in a little studio against the fighter. I think the last name was Resto. I think Jose Resto. In a little studio. No excitement. It was drab. And Davis's performance was boring. He would stick and move. Won by a wide decision. Didn't excite the crowd the way Leonard did. And then we saw with Davis, he was a good, solid pro. His best moment was fighting a draw with Meldrick Taylor before Taylor was champion. And Davis's opportunities, I didn't like the way he was managed all in all. I mean, I got to be honest about it, or the way he was moved. But part of it is Davis didn't have a strong chin. So even against ordinary fighters, he was at risk. Leonard had a good chin, so Leonard wasn't, nearly as vulnerable, at nearly as much at risk as was Davis. But so Davis has 4 chances to fight for a belt, but listen to the circumstances. He fights Edwin Rosario, a Puerto Rican in Puerto Rico. Rosario's a Hall of Famer. Rosario's a great fighter. Davis is beating him going into the last round. He's like a point ahead. And then they exchange punches in the closing seconds, and Davis gets knocked down. And that's the difference. Davis doesn't win the championship. Then he fights a guy, Jim Watt, a very good fight in Scotland for one of the major belts. It's in Scotland. It's in Watt's hometown. Davis loses a close decision, and I'm not saying the decision was wrong. I mean, you could argue that Watt really deserved the decision. No argument there. But the idea, what are you doing fighting in a foreign country in another guy's land? Then he's a little past his peak. He's fighting Buddy McGirt for one of the titles. It's in New York, but they're both New Yorkers. But at that point, McGirt is the more popular fighter by far, more known, and Davis is kind of like on the comeback, and he got stopped in 1 round. And then he's fighting for one of the lesser belts, I think, against Dana Rosenblatt. I was at the McGirt fight at the Garden, and then I'm in Boston. I was there watching him fight Dana Rosenblatt, but he's fighting Rosenblatt's hometown, okay? And he gets stopped there. It's kind of heartbreaking. He could never get over the top. He fights Hector Camacho on national television, loses a decision. Nice competitive fight. Camacho's always that little step ahead of him.
Yeah.
And there should have been a way to get Davis to a world title. That's what I'm saying. There should have been a way. And I'm not, even though I wasn't crazy about the way he's managed, I'm not blaming his managers that he wasn't a world champion, but it just didn't work out for Davis. He was a good pro, a good solid pro, but we were looking at potential greatness, because when he was an amateur, Mac, the New York Golden Glove, some people were saying he could be the next Sugar Ray Robinson.
So if Angelo Dundee is his manager, do you think that might have changed the way it, for his boxing pro career, Jack?
Boy, I'm going to tell you, I was friends with his manager, the late Mike Jones, and I'm friendly with his co-manager Dennis Rappaport, who are alive today. And this isn't a knock on them when I say this, but I believe Dundee, who was a master at manipulating things, and in a good way, I mean,
right,
he would have found a way to somehow get Davis to a world title. You know, I can't say that with absolute confidence, but if you're putting me on the spot, I feel Dundee would find a way to get it done, get him in the right scenario, and get him to the title. It would have gotten Davis one way or the other to the title. But I will say this, I don't think most managers would have. I don't think the majority would have, because he wasn't the easiest guy, to always get fights for. His chin was so. So you just couldn't throw him in with the best guys all the time and think he'd just mow through them.
I got you. Charles Mooney becomes a boxing trainer. He doesn't even become a professional
I love
fighter.
it.
Yes.
I was with Charles Mooney. That's what I mentioned. And
yes.
What was it? March or so, I think it was. I went down to his gym in Florida and I hung out and I did a story on him. People could Google it, Charles Mooney's name, and read the story I wrote on him.
Yes.
And I have to tell you something that's revealing, Mac. Charles Mooney loses in the finals. He winds up with the silver medal. And he was telling me during that time we were talking, I thought I was doing better than what the judges gave me credit for. All 5 judges scored against me. I thought I was landing more punches. I was doing this, I was doing that. And he kind of shrugged, because he's fighting a North Korean. And I said, Charles, I could find out whether you were landing more punches. And he looks at me, how? You out of your mind? And Charles Mooney wasn't familiar with the thing CompuBox. And I thought CompuBox can't have the totals from the 1976 Olympics. They weren't even in business, but they have a way of going back. They send me the bout sheet, jabs landed, uppercuts, hooks, this. And Mooney, and I get the stats and I send it to Mooney. He landed 3 more punches in the fight and threw 23 more punches. And then and CompuBox always writes statistics. Not statistics, comments.
Okay.
And in their comments on this one particular fight, the finals, they put down that the judges didn't do justice to Mooney's effort. It should have gone, the judges should have scored it 3-2 either way, meaning it was a toss-up, not 5-0. You could have scored it 3-2 for Mooney, 3-2 for the North Korean. And I get that to Mooney. So in a way, that was validation to him, putting something away that had always been on his mind.
See, that's excellent. I mean, I bet now he has proof, right? Now he can walk around and
walk around.
Yeah.
Look, I got wrapped. I didn't get wrapped. He landed 3 more punches over the fight.
Right.
But the 5-0 score was harsh against
ridiculous,
him
right?
To have it that way, because it was so close. It was a toss-up and it was over. And I watched the tape of the fight. The North Korean was landing the heavier blows. Mooney was landing the crisper blows.
Okay, gotcha.
So it depends what you like at the moment. It was such a hard fight to score when I saw it. So hard to score.
I mean, you got that little white spot on your gloves. You got, you can't hit him with anything else.
And the funny thing about it, Mooney thought that North Korean fighter was kind of a nasty guy, just in his attitude. He fought a South Korean before that, and Mooney was in the service. He was a sergeant.
Right.
He was an older guy. And Mooney spent a lot of time overseas, so he learned how to speak Korean. So when they met at ring center, he's talking Korean to the South Korean guy, and he looked bugged out. He told the South Korean guy, like, what? You're talking my language to me so smoothly? Like, he put down his head. Are you from Korea too? He's thinking.
Interesting. So, Jack, let's get to. I'm gonna do the history of the semi-pro first because it might be shorter than Oscar Robinson. I want to save him for last anyway. So, if I was to ask you, what does Johnny Unitas, Marion Motley, and Sam Mills have in common?
Well, that's obvious now. They played semi-pro football. I mean, that's the piece.
Right. And the other answer would be they're all Hall of Famers. It's interesting when you go back and look at the players that actually played in semi-pro, how far these guys have gone. Now, of course, not all of them. But I just want to give you a team that you could form with all of them in their prime of former semi-pro football players. And, folks, there's 20 leagues of semi-pro around you right now. The only problem they have is getting sponsorship and keeping the money trail going. But there's a lot of talented players out there. So, all right. So I'm gonna start off with my coach, Jack, Sam Weich. Sam Weich played semi-pro for the Wheeling Ironmen, the quarterback, of course. So I got a Super Bowl coach as my head coach. My starting quarterback, of course, is Johnny Unitas. He played for the Bloomfield Rams. He made $6 a game at the time before he got drafted. My backup quarterback is Ken Stabler. Ken Stabler played for the ASFC League, Super Bowl winner. So I already got my starting quarterback, Johnny Unitas, one of the greatest of all time, and a Super Bowl quarterback in Ken Stabler. So, of course, I need some running backs. So I'll take Marion Motley, Hall of Famer with the Cleveland Browns, and Marv Hubbard, all-pro for the Oakland Raiders. So I got my two running backs at tight end. I'm going to put Bob Tucker, another all-pro tight end. So my offense is looking good against any team out there in their primes, Jack. And at my wide receiver, I have Rod Holliday, who played with the Firebirds, who was a San Diego Charger wide receiver, and Jack Ferrant, who also played for the
Mac, I'm not too impressed with your wide receivers. Compared to what you can put out there.
I know.
opposite than
I
for
got to
another
depend on
team.
Johnny
Come on,
Unitas. I got to depend on
Johnny
Johnny.
Unitas, I'm impressed with. Yeah.
I got
Johnny, you could hold his own and then some against. You could argue against anyone if you want, but
Ken Stabler.
come on. Yeah,
Ken Stabler.
Ken Stabler's a backup. Listen, there's no guarantee Johnny U would start over Ken Stabler if they went to training camp. Johnny U probably starts, yes. But if Johnny U has a little bit of an off game, he's struggling, Ken Stabler comes in.
Gets hurt, we got Ken. And I got a great running backs. I got Marion Motley, one of the greatest running backs of all time.
Yeah.
And Marv Hubbard, power guy. I got power. A power backfield. How are you going to stop? 3rd and 1, I got you. All we got to do is get it to Bob Tucker short, get 2nd and 2, 3rd and 1. Guess what? We're going to get through
it. These are strong guys. These are grinders. They're grinders. Yeah.
Yes. So now, offensive line, there were tons of offensive linemen that ended up playing in the NFL. One played for the Jets during the Super Bowl. You had another one that played for the Dallas Cowboys center for years. I'm not going to get all their names because it's an endless list. This was like the XFL and like the USFL or now the UFL. A lot of players move up from the independent leagues to play pro. But I do got a pretty good defense, Jack. All right. Well, first let me have my kicker. My kicker is going to be Mark Mosley. All right. Mark Mosley played for the Virginia Sailors, MVP of the league, a scoring leader back in 1972. I mean, accurate as the day is run. So I got Mark Mosley as my kicker. So, I mean, that's pretty good, right? So on defense, you're going to like my defensive line, Jack. My defensive line, I'm going to start at defensive tackle, Joe Klecko. Joe Klecko, before he played in professional football, played at a New York in the New York independent leagues and semi-pro.
Mac, I want to know that these guys play at least 4 games. If they stop by for 1 game,
these guys
they had nothing to do on a Sunday afternoon, I don't think of them as semi-pro players. If you remember, play a few games at least.
If you remember, Joe Klecko didn't get drafted. So I mean, these guys went out and played for 1, 2 years, 3 years, some 4 years.
Okay, that's cool. If they played a good part of one season, then I consider them really semi-pro players at one point.
Yes. So I also got Coy Bacon at defensive end and Otis Sistrom at the other.
Coy Bacon, didn't he punt?
No, Coy Bacon was a defensive end.
Who am I thinking of? What was the name? Coy, the punter for the Giants.
Ernie Coy. Ernie Coy was a
Coy, right? Yeah. Okay, my bad. Yeah, right. Okay.
So I also got defensive lineman Eric Swan, who was drafted in the 1st round from Bay State semi-pro. I got a heck of a defensive line. Joe Klecko, I've got a defensive line. A linebacker, I already mentioned Sam Mills. Sam Mills is my starting linebacker, right? And I got linebacker Harold Wells from the Eagles. I also got a pretty good defensive backfield. My starting safety is Jim Thorpe, one of the greatest athletes of all time who played semi-pro.
And his cornerback, Jim Thorpe.
Safety, because he was a tight end.
Yeah, safety. I mean, what do you make out of Jim Thorpe? Because football, Mac, is about specialization. You have to be outstanding in your position. In your position, you have to be outstanding. It doesn't mean you wind up being an outstanding player, but you really got to specialize in that position. Jim Thorpe was a great all-around athlete, but I don't think he specialized. Case in point, Drew Henson. He was great at baseball, football, but he wasn't that good at any one position, at any one thing.
Well, I'd have him return punts too. He was going to be on my punt return team too. So
maybe returning punts
and kickoffs. I mean, I got an electric guy. I got an electric guy who was a decathlete. I mean, this guy was one of the greatest athletes of all time. I got Mike Bass, who played for the Redskins, at my defensive back.
Yeah.
Right. I also got Ted Victor. at defensive back, who also played for the Redskins. I mean, what I'd say, Jack, is there was some quality Hall of Fame All-Pro players that started in semi-pro. Of course, they call them semi-pro or independent leagues. Now, independent leagues have been around forever. They were going up against pro football before it really became pro football. They would play against college football teams until the NCAA formed, and they stopped doing that because they didn't want to see these guys, the NCAA players, get hurt. So, I mean, there was a lot of players that came out of this, and some was, as you said, brief stops, but some played there for years because they couldn't get in college, and a lot of black players played because they couldn't get in the NFL because the color barrier at the time in the 40s and 30s.
Yeah.
And the 40s. So a lot of them played in the independent leagues or semi-pro. So from 19 to 1985, which is really interesting, Jack, the National Football All-Star Game. This was right before the Super Bowl, a day before the Super Bowl, where they actually had all-star semi-pro independent players come and play a game in front of scouts. And the professional scouts there would be able to take over their contracts. It wasn't a lot of money back then, but this is how close the semi-pro was with football. Day before the Super Bowl, they're scouting these players, looking to pick them up off the independent leagues. And of course, at one time, it was a feeder program back in the 60s, early 70s, before you had World Football League, before you had the USFL, before you had all these other leagues that the NFL used as, a secondary place. They used the semi-pro. That's where Marv Hubbard, Bob Tucker, and that's how they all got on their teams. So it was interesting just to look back and look at these players. It took a lot of work, too, to find out where they played, how long they played, as you were saying, and what they did afterwards. And I guess maybe Johnny Unitas would be the shining jewel there of all of them. But you got some great players, Jack, that played at those independent leagues.
Well, you didn't have a USFL, and now if a player can't make the NFL, he wants to find his way back, or you have a hidden gem who's not on an NFL team. Where does he come from? Well, college in reality is the minor league system.
Right.
That's where they get their players out of. Sometimes a player could come from a Canadian league, the USFL, make a roster, XFL. Semi-pro now, Mac, I think, is at the bottom of the barrel. No one who has any chance of making an NFL team is playing semi-pro. It's just not happening. If a semi-pro player is really outstanding, unbelievably good, yeah, I could see an NFL team having a scout, just keep an eye on a few semi-pro, games, just to keep busy or whatever. But that semi-pro player, he would graduate conceivably to the Canadian League, the USFL.
Exactly.
If he's really the top player in the semi-pro league, there's a chance of that happening. He wouldn't be signed by an NFL team to a practice squad unless something crazy and bizarre happens.
Yeah, like a tryout. Like a tryout or something like that. I mean, if they had tape and they went and did a tryout, but you're right, Jack. Sam Mills went from semi-pro to the USFL.
I saw him play with the Philadelphia Stars. There he was outstanding. But I think when he played for the Philadelphia Stars, he had the option perhaps to sign with the NFL team, and certain players elected to go with the USFL. Right. The biggest name would be Jim Kelly, and then you had Steve Young. They could have been in the NFL, but they elected to take the money to be in the USFL. Herschel Walker, Doug Flutie,
Right, exactly. So we got 10 minutes.
League. I loved the USFL back in the day.
I did too. We got 10 minutes for Oscar Robertson. Not enough time to show how great this guy was. Of course, he averaged 25.7 points per game. He had 7,804 rebounds, 9,887 assists, had a triple-double, first in history, now one of two with Westbrook. but the guy was just a scoring machine too, Jack. If he wanted to be, he's a rebounder, all-around player, one of the greatest of all time. In fact, ESPN has him as the 35th greatest athlete of the 20th century. So not only
Matt, that was somewhat 20 years ago when ESPN did that poll.
Yes.
Well, that was so long ago, they would have probably reevaluated, because when fans talk about the greatest players of all time, why isn't Oscar Robinson's name ever brought up?
Agree.
I mean, I don't want to say he was necessarily the NBA's first superstar, because Bob Cousy came a little before him, but he was close to it. And I remember Red Auerbach saying after Cousy retired that Oscar Robertson was, the best player like he ever saw. He wasn't comparing him to Bill Russell. I think he was comparing him to the other guards and to the forwards. And and Auerbach said I'd even put him ahead of Bob Cousy, who played so brilliantly for me. Ironically, I'm reading a book on Bob Cousy now. And Bob Cousy, even though he was compared to Oscar Robertson, could never understand the comparison, because Oscar, who came out of the Olympics in 1960, was actually Jerry West's teammate who won the gold medal. Imagine that, a backcourt of Jerry West and Oscar Robertson. Wow, I mean, that's like awesome. He was a big guard. He was a big guard at the time, bigger than Cousy. So Cousy never really guarded him when the Celtics played the Cincinnati Royals. And yes, Cincinnati had an NBA team then, Mac.
Yeah.
Why don't they have one now? They have the Reds, they have the Bengals. I mean, they're a big enough city to support an NBA team. They're a good sports town. And the Cincinnati Royals weren't that good. They were, they were so-so during the years Oscar played for them. And Oscar had one season where he just averaged a triple-double for the whole season.
Right.
And, but Oscar was more of a shooting guard. I mean, he was more along the lines of a Steph Curry. Steph Curry's not really a facilitator in the true sense of the word, and Oscar was basically the same way. He wasn't a traditional point guard like a Bob Cousy, a Jason Kidd, a John Stockton. He just wasn't quite that type of player. But he was just a great player. Play, and he finally got his one NBA championship years later, towards the end of his career. Like, he had a 13-year career when he played for the Milwaukee Bucks, and his teammate was Lou Alcindor, now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it just showed you how great Oscar was. He was, that he could win a championship late in his career with the Bucks. It's a shame he didn't win it with the Cincinnati Royals. But at that time, he was going against the Celtic dynasty. But Cousy always used to say he didn't compare himself to Oscar Robertson, because Cousy always looked to pass first. Oscar looked to shoot first, but there's a reason. Oscar by far was the best shooter on his team, and Cousy had really good players who could shoot that he could always pass off to. There was a difference involved. And we forget the great players like Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor.
Yes.
When we talk about the greatest players ever, their names don't quite come up. And I think it's in part because they didn't win a championship, but also you think of the NBA logo. Jerry West is on the logo. Jerry West is white, Oscar Robertson is black. And I thought, does that have anything to do with it? I'm not sure, because Jerry West played for a big market team, the Lakers. Oscar Robertson played for a small market team, the Cincinnati Royals. Jerry West's Lakers were usually in the mix to win the championship. They would always come up short, get their heart broken in the finals by the Celtics. So West got more national exposure, than Oscar Robertson did. But Oscar Robertson was slightly the better player amongst the two.
Question for you, Jack. I mean, the logo. When did that logo of Jerry West, when did that become official?
I don't think it's ever official. They could change it anytime they want.
Well, what I mean is, when did that become the logo? I mean, was that always the logo of the NBA? It can't be always the logo of the NBA. It had to come out some year. I never looked that up. I mean, because Jerry West was not only a great ball player, great coach, great manager, great executive. I mean, he was all NBA. He was the NBA guy, NBA lifer. Even Oscar Robertson, the Big O, he was involved in the NFLPA. He ended up challenging the NBA because of the strict rules of draft and the strict rules of free agency, and he won the lawsuit. So he's inducted twice into the Hall of Fame. I don't know if he's the only one that is inducted twice. I think Jerry West is too, both on the opposite sides, right? One was working for the NBA, one with the players. So, but I don't know when that logo, it's bothering me now, when the logo became.
Technically, it's not Jerry West. It looks like Jerry West. It is, but it doesn't say it's Jerry West, but everyone knows it's Jerry West. You said something, Mac, in your comments that was very thought-provoking. And I'm comparing it to what I talked about with Frank Laterzo in boxing. No matter what you think of Floyd Mayweather, the fighter, when you consider all the money he's made and the career he's had in the ring, you could then say he's had the greatest career of anyone in boxing history. When you consider his money, getting out undefeated, this and that, not the greatest fighter, the greatest career in boxing. And even Frank, who's not a Mayweather guy, kind of acknowledges that's the case. I could argue this with the NBA. I never thought of this before. Of all the men involved in the history of the NBA, of all the people, who's had the greatest NBA career? It's Jerry West. It's Jerry West, easily. You want to know why? Because he's probably the greatest executive in the history of in the NBA, and one of the great superstars in the history of the NBA. Think of that. So even if he's the 20th best player in NBA history, he's the greatest executive. He's had the greatest NBA career as far as accomplishments, what he's gotten done.
I agree.
Know how he performed on the court, how he performed as an executive, more so than anyone else. Michael Jordan could have overtaken him had he done anything substantial as an owner of the Bobcats. He was terrible as an owner.
I got an answer. I asked the question. The producer, Linda, gives it to me. The NBA logo was designed in 1969 by Alan Siegel, the founder of Siegel and Gale, a branding consultancy firm. Siegel drew inspiration from a photo of Jerry West of the Los Angeles Lakers. The logo is red, white, and blue, blah, blah, blah. Features West silhouette dribbling. He charged $14,000 for the logo. So it is from a photo of Jerry West, and it was in 19...
We all know it's Jerry West. Mac, that's not in dispute.
So
around the clock. Jerry West.
Jack, I asked the question. Jack, I asked the question. What year? You didn't know. I'm telling you, it was 1969. That's when the logo of Jerry West became the logo of the NBA.
But when you think of it, 1969, it wasn't easy to put the logo down. Bill Russell had just, retired. Okay, then, and when you look at revisionist thinking is easy, but when Russell retired, it was still debatable who was greater, Russell or Chamberlain. And the thing against Chamberlain, they didn't win. He wasn't the ultimate team guy, Chamberlain. And you had Oscar compared to West. But West's profile was how West was the MVP of the series that the Lakers lost to the Celtics, Bill Russell's last year. They lost in 7 games. West scores 45 points in game 7. And when they interview Red Auerbach, one of the first things he says, wow, that Jerry West was sensational. Like he went out of his way, and Auerbach would like to rub salt in the wounds of the opponents. Yeah. That was his style, but he was, wow, what a Jerry West admirer he was.
Yes. So coming to the end of the show, folks, we hope you enjoyed it. A lot of information. Of course, Boxing with Jack is very informative, no matter what you're talking. Great stuff about the 1976 team. Talked a little bit about the semi-pro. The history of semi-pro football started a long time ago, before the NFL formed and the players that came from there. And of course, we talked about the great Oscar Robinson, the Big O, one of the greatest NBA players of all time. We hope you enjoyed the show. A lot of views, a lot of comments. We thank you for that. We'll see you tomorrow on the Big Football Show. Have a great